Star Wars is full of holes. Literally. Hi, how are you? So, this is fascinating. I had this thought back in 2021. I was watching Star Wars. And I was watching movie after movie. And what I noticed was that Star Wars had a lot of holes in it. Like actual holes. Like people falling into holes. I mean, Luke is battling Vader and he falls in a hole. And then there's a Sarlacc pit that's a hole. And Ben Kenobi is standing trying to turn off the tractor beam while he's standing over a hole. There's just holes. Like in the Phantom Menace, Obi-Wan Kenobi is battling Darth Maul over a hole. There's just holes everywhere. And I thought, why are there so many holes? And then I started to think about it and notice that every scene in Star Wars, pretty much every scene, has a hole in it. Because the holes aren't just like going down and going up. The holes are actually like doorways. Every time they pass through a doorway or some kind of, portal, or they go through light speed, they're going through a hole. So the holes are horizontal. No, this is horizontal. The holes, good Lord. The holes are vertical and horizontal holes, and they're everywhere. I want to take you through this because this is fascinating. Once I give you all these examples, you'll never look at Star Wars the same again. But I think you'll appreciate it even more. It will be even more enjoyable. You'll enjoy it for the holes. You used to enjoy it for the characters and the plot and the pew pew laser beams. Now you're going to appreciate it for the holes. It's going to be great. All right, so like A New Hope, it starts out with a little ship getting, pulled into the hole of a bigger ship. Right? There's the first hole. And then Darth Vader walks through a hole. And then the droids go into a hole where 3PO ducks down and they go into the escape pod. And they go into a hole. And then they get the escape pod goes out of a hole and then lands on Tatooine, and then they get out of the hole and they walk across the sand. And then later, R2-D2 is sucked up into the hole of the Jawa car. And then they go visit Luke, and Luke walks out of a hole, the doorway of his, home, and then he talks to Aunt Beru, who's down in a hole. His entire home is a hole in the ground. And then there's some more holes, R2 is standing in a cave hole while Luke is battling the sand people, and then Ben Kenobi lifts up a trunk and pulls a lightsaber out of a hole to give to Luke, and then they see Han, and then the Millennium Falcon flies out of a hole to leave Tatooine. They go into space, they go to where Alderaan was, and then they get tractor beamed into a hole inside the Death Star, and then in the landing bay there's a giant hole. And then they go rescue the princess, and they go down this long hallway that looks like a hole, and then Luke opens up the door, and Leia escapes out of a hole, and they're in the hallway, and she blasts a hole in the side of the wall, and then they all jump down a hole into the trash compactor, and then they eventually get out of the trash compactor by walking out of a hole, and they run through the halls through many different holes, and then they escape in the Millennium Falcon. Well, before that, Luke watches Darth and Ben battle lightsabers through a hole, right? The doorway there. And then they escape the Millennium Falcon out of a hole. And then they, each climb the ladder to get to the gun thingies. They each go into their own little hole. And afterwards, they go to Yavin and they talk about stuff. And then they get in the cockpits that are kind of a hole of the X-Wings, and they fly off and they go in the trench and they do kinds of battles. And then Luke blasts the Death Star by getting lasers into a hole, and that blows up the Death Star. There's holes everywhere. And I think the movie ends by a transition phase that closes, which is the closing of a hole, then George Lucas's name appears. There's holes everywhere. Star Wars is full of holes. And then the next movie and the next movie, they throw the Emperor down a hole. There's the Sarlacc pit. There's, in Empire Strikes Back, Luke is battling Darth Vader. He goes down a hole and then comes up a hole, battles Vader, who tosses him down a hole. Luke jumps out of the hole. He jumps down and walks through another hole, and he gets thrown out the window that looks like a hole. And then he battles Vader some more and then drops down a hole, which goes into a hole, which goes into a hole, sliding into a hole, out a hole, and then is rescued by the Millennium Falcon by going into a hole. Lots of holes. So what is the deal with all these holes in Star Wars? Are you tired of me saying holes yet? I got kind of dizzy because I was hating holes so much. I'm dizzy from all the holes. Anyway, so like why? Why are there so many holes in Star Wars? I thought about this, and one, in space, there's holes in other movies. I mean, I remember in Batman Rises, Dark Knight Rises, he's got to get out of a hole. And, there's in the movie Speed, the bus has lots of holes. They're constantly going in and out of holes, and they jump over a hole. Yeah, that bus jump over a hole, right? Anyway, there's holes in other movies, but Star Wars seems to have a lot more holes than most movies. I think it's space and fantasy, and they got different sets. There's just more opportunities for holes. Oh, and I also forgot to mention, Ben Kenobi is turning off the, or did I mention that? What am I talking about? Ben Kenobi is turning off the tractor beam. He's got to be careful not to fall in the hole. So I think one of the reasons they have holes is because it creates a sense of drama and danger, right? Nothing more dangerous than a hole. You might fall in it. And they got no railings on any of these things in Star Wars. There's no railings. They just have a hole, randomly. There's holes all over the place. Also, so I've been studying Star Wars for many years because I'm a nerd and I'm also interested in it. But I remember reading an article where George Lucas was saying, one of his inspirations, there were a lot of inspirations for Star Wars that I read George Lucas had. One, he was studying anthropology, he loved hot rods, he loved Flash Gordon, he loved all kinds of history, and he wanted to mesh all that together in outer space, and he wanted to tell a fairy tale. But he was also reading a lot of Joseph Campbell, who is one of the great mythology teachers. And once I heard the name Joseph Campbell, well, I had to read everything I could about Joseph Campbell. And so I read The Hero with a Thousand Faces and The Power of Myth and all kinds of stuff. And the thing about the hero's journey, which is, the myth that Luke goes on in pretty much every movie and every book you've ever read and every story, it basically follows the hero's journey. You leave home, you go into a world you haven't been before, you discover something new, you come back home, and you share that something new with your home that saves everybody, right? That's the cycle. Every movie, every book, that's what happens all the time, is they go through the hero's journey. And when the hero is on the journey, they go through a lot of transitions. And I think a lot of those holes, besides creating drama and danger, is transitions. In every scene, there's a transition. In every act of a story, there's transition. The hero's going through different phases. And as Morpheus said in the movie Matrix, I will show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. So I think, Alice in Wonderland, she goes down the rabbit hole, and I think there's lots of twists and turns. There's many different corridors, many different holes you could go down in that rabbit hole. And I think, metaphorically, physically, there's a lot of holes, but metaphorically, I think the hero is going through a lot of transitions. And, Luke goes from, a spoiled little whiny farm boy. Why can't I go, into town and the power converters or whatever he wants to play with? Anyway, he's whiny. And then by the end, he is a hero, which that whole movie takes place in, a couple hours? Really? I mean, literally just like a day. Everything, the Star Wars movies, years go by and then everything dramatic happens in like 2 days. Anyway, he grows from this whiny farm kid to this heroic, mature, half Jedi guy in a day. But so he's got to go through a lot of different transitions along the way of psychology. So it's psychological transitions, and those might be helped by showing you going through different holes, going through different corridors. And I'm getting really deep and philosophical about it now, but man, there's no way you can watch Star Wars and not notice the holes. They're everywhere. I mean, people are walking in and out of doorways and in and out of holes, and I just think, yeah, it's not only a physical thing, it's also some mythological, psychological representation and symbolism of, maturity and transitioning of your characters. And anyway, that's what I was thinking about. So I've been thinking about this since 2021 when I noticed all the holes. And I just thought I'd talk about it. What do you think? Do you think Star Wars, intentionally put a lot of holes? Or that just happened naturally? Maybe all of the holes were not intentional, but some of those holes got to be put there for mythological, psychological, symbolical reasons, right? I was just thinking about that. Anyway, I would really love to know your thoughts on this. I love Star Wars so much. And I love thinking about it and talking about it, and I love mythology, and I love story structure, and so this topic is just right up my alley. So anyway, what do you think? I would love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for joining me this week, and I will talk to you next week about another fascinating topic that we'll figure out between now and then. All right, have a good week. And watch out for dangerous holes. Although holes could be good. For your transition of your character. All right. All right, this is the end of the video now. All right, bye.